Good morning. Welcome to CATEX TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. This is a live broadcast from Princeton, New Jersey. Today is Wednesday, October 15, 2008. It's 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in the U.S. It's 4:30 p.m. in London. If you need to reach us during the broadcast, you can phone in toll-free at 1-866-67-CATEX. Today's birthdays: Lee Iacocca is 84 years old today, the former Chrysler chairman who rescued Chrysler by getting a bailout from the U.S. government. A now well-trodden path. We have two breaking stories. They both come from Insurance Insider. Bermudian reinsurer Max Capital Group will cut its allocation to alternative investments to 10 to 20% of invested assets from its current 15 to 25% range. The company said it plans to reduce, as a result of a loss of about 20% of total invested assets of about $5.2 billion at the end of the year. 12% of that is due to alternative investments. So they're going to begin to cut back on risky hedge fund investments, presumably. And also the Benfield shareholders this morning or last night, we can't tell which, with 99.8% of the vote, approved the takeover bid by Aon. That vote was down in Bermuda. So the Aon takeover bid has been approved by Benfield officially. It's an £844 million takeover of the company. So that deal should finally become consummated. And now to our main news. In the United States, there's ongoing discussion again about the economy. The stock market is down now about 361 points. The producer price index in the U.S., prices paid to U.S. producers, fell in September for a second consecutive month. This is mainly due to lower fuel costs. They dropped by 0.4%. This decrease was after a 0.9% drop in August. So-called core producer prices that exclude gas and food, however, increased 0.4% from the month earlier. So this means now that, according to the Commerce Department, the decrease in the value of consumer goods, we have another sign of weakening consumer demand. Sales at U.S. retailers have also dropped. In the United States now, with the stock market, as I mentioned, is down about 360 points. There's an awful lot going on here. The markets in Asia essentially cratered last night while the U.S. slept. There's a final presidential debate scheduled about 60 miles from here up at Hofstra University in Long Island up in New York between Senators Obama and McCain. The economy will certainly be a major discussion point on that. And then today at 12:30, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke is going to be making a speech in Washington, D.C. that's going to be closely watched for some indication of either future direction or of confidence in the marketplace. And hopefully we'll see the stock market begin to regain some ground by then. Meanwhile, in the reinsurance world, Allianz, the German insurance company that is Europe's largest insurer by premium income, said this morning that it is well capitalized and it will not need to tap into the German government's rescue package. According to Allianz, we see no direct need to tap the government's rescue fund. Similarly, another German insurance company, this one a reinsurer, Hannover Re, one of the 5 largest reinsurers in the world, says it does not see any need to use the German government's rescue fund. The financial crisis will, however, have a negative impact on Hannover Re's investment result, but they're not going to need to tap into any of the German taxpayers' money. And then also, Munich Re has also similarly said that it will not need to tap into any of the government's investment rescue package. They said that they have reduced their risky credits considerably in the past few years, and that's why we're in a good position now. However, the German reinsurer CEO Nicholas von Bomhard did opine on some other matters. He said that the financial crisis could claim more victims among German banks. He said, quote, "Other cases are possible. We have not seen the end of it yet." He did exclude a bankruptcy on the scale of the Lehman Brothers collapse in the U.S., but he did warn that more is yet to come. At a very important hearing down in Washington, D.C. yesterday, that's continuing today as well, in front of the United States Senate Agricultural Committee, the subject of credit default swaps was finally discussed. insofar as how their ramifications might be impacting the current financial crisis. The New York State Superintendent of Insurance, Eric Dinello, was a witness, and he testified at the hearing that he endorsed a more holistic approach to the regulation of credit default swaps. Dinello explained that credit default swaps can be divided into two categories. The first, he said, are transactions in which the holder, the actual possessor of an obligation such as a bond, swaps the risk of default with another party, who then guarantees it for a fee. That transaction, he noted, is very similar to insurance and in fact is classified as insurance. A second form of default swap described by the superintendent is a so-called naked credit default swap. That's substantially different. No party involved in the swap has ownership of the underlying bond, and according to Dinello, it's effectively a, quote, directional bet. According to the superintendent, two critical developments contributed to the increase in credit default swaps took place in the year 2000. The first was the enactment of the Commodity Futures Modernization Act under President Bill Clinton. Dinello said that that modernization effort created a so-called safe harbor for credit default swaps by exempting them from regulation under the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which is a government entity that regulates futures trading. During the same year, the superintendent noted, the New York Department of Insurance, under a different administration, of course, he'd be referring to Governor Pataki's administration, was asked what the superintendent called a, quote, very carefully crafted question, inquiring if naked credit default swaps were considered insurance contracts. Dinello said clearly the question was framed to ask only about naked default swaps with no proof of loss. Under the facts we were given, the swap was not a contract of insurance because the buyer had no material interest and the filing of a claim does not require a loss. Nevertheless, the market took the department's opinion, he said, on a subset of credit default swaps as a ruling on all swaps. And to be fair, Dinello said, the department has not done anything to the contrary since then. Because of these developments, credit default swaps were allowed to go unregulated. Now that letter, by the way, is ensconced in a tabernacle, and I have spoken to a few people who've actually seen it. It's guarded night and day. It's the underpinning for the whole foundation of the $60 trillion market. Meanwhile, at the hearing, the chairman of the hearing, Democratic Senator Tom Harkin from Iowa, he noted that credit default swaps apparently need not be traded on open, transparent exchanges. It's literally impossible to know whether swaps are being traded at fair value or whether institutions trading them are becoming over-leveraged or dangerously overextended. Yes, you're exactly right, Senator Harkin. That's exactly what's happening. He said he plans to introduce new legislation next year that would amend current laws to force many of these derivatives, including credit default swaps, onto regulated exchanges. On over-the-counter derivatives, he said, quote, need to be traded on a regulated exchange so that we know who, how much, and what the values are, and they have to answer a call once or twice a day to make sure they've got the money to back it up. There's too much undercover stuff going on, said the chairman, in the financial markets. As a sidelight, earlier at the hearing, Dinello was asked about credit default swaps and American International Group. He went on to say this: when we at the department were dealing with finding a solution for AIG, we knew that AIG had written almost $500 billion in swaps, but we had no idea how much in swaps had been written in AIG itself or by whom. This meant we did not know what the broader effect on an AIG bankruptcy would be. Amazing. Of course, the International Swaps and Derivatives Association then stated in testimony that they hope to avoid regulation, as discussed by Chairman Harkin. A gentleman named Robert Pickle, who's the CEO of the ISDA, said, in our view, inhibiting the bilateral derivatives industry in the U.S. would deprive American companies of a significant means of managing their risks, thereby increasing the cost of goods for consumers across the board. Well, I'm sure that went over very well at the hearing in Washington yesterday. Meanwhile, in London, the new global guru Gordon Brown speaks. British Prime Minister Brown urged the world this morning to use the financial crisis as an opportunity to conclude a global trade pact and said Central and Eastern